The digitization of core business processes can be pretty slow in the insurance industry. I don't know how many of you have worked in that space, but it's slightly different. And in this session, we're going to hear about some success stories at Hannover Re. We're going to hear how they're introducing new processes to provide additional customer insights and to improve customer service. And I'd like to introduce Matthias Adrian, who's going to talk us through that. Over to you.
Thanks, David, for this kind introduction. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I guess this is the session between now and the cocktails, right? So I better hurry up.
Thank
you. Is there anyone working in the insurance space currently, just for my personal curiosity? Not too many, actually. Well, anyway. So I'm going to introduce a case that benefited substantially from disruptive technology, data analytics technology, and explain in a little bit, in a short while, how this was coming about. So maybe one slide about Hannover Re as a group, as a company. They typically rank amongst the top 3 reinsurers of the world, depending whether you look at the people or at the things insurance, so properties, casualty, life and health. And they, as a reinsurance company, they just act globally by nature, by their very nature. So, and this was one of the factors that contributed significantly to the scope and the complexity of the project that we're going to talk about in just a couple of minutes. This is a case I'd like to present to you and introduce to you from the life and health space. So we're looking at a business scenario for people's insurance, and being a reinsurer, the clients of a reinsurance company are the primary insurers, the insurance companies that you may deal with in your daily life when you ask for a life insurance or a disability insurance. So today, being successful in that space is increasingly difficult. It's all about the customer journey, from the interest, from capturing the attention of a potential customer to the point where you close the contract, and then over a lifetime of maybe 30, 35, 40 years for a typical life policy, you have to stay in contact with your customer for servicing and also for handling claims. So the challenge here increasingly is to provide a consistent and enjoyable even user interface. Insurance these days still has to be sold, depending on the market, pretty aggressively. But there's a change in the market that would actually be a pull factor. So insurance is also looked after. It's actually being bought, not just being sold. And it all comes along with the digitization that people are in a buyer's market. They tend to have more information than they had before, and market dynamics is changing throughout the industry. There's a tendency towards individual products, not just a standardized set of 2 or 3 products that you try to sell aggressively into a constituency, but you try to tailor something that makes more sense depending on the situation of an applicant, for example. The interaction, as I said, is primarily driven from the customer's point of view, not so much from the vendor's point of view, the insurance company's point of view. And it's increasingly important to cut down or to reduce process time. So if you, 2 or 3 years ago, applied for a policy, it would go to paper, print it out, go to mail, you look through that, going to take you another week, then you return that by mail. So process time would easily be 2 to 6 weeks, and a lot of stuff got lost actually on the way from the insurance company to the applicant and back. So to remain competitive, to attract new business, you have to cut back or ideally reduce media breaks and have everything in one go. So a couple of other factors, additional factors, contribute to the complexity of that. People come in through a multitude of channels these days, and increasingly they change channels throughout the transaction. So they may begin buying a policy over the iPhone, get stuck, call into a call desk center, and you have it. You have to switch the channel. If you're familiar with IT infrastructure in insurance, you know that IT systems in the insurance space have that they're struggling to keep up with that. Additionally, there's an increasing trend and the tendency for cost inefficiency. So there's pressure on everyone in the market to reduce operational costs as much as they can. And combined, this is a situation that is ideal for introducing disruptive technology if it can deliver to the promise. So depending on the product type that you're looking at, and for a life insurance policy, automation rates of up to and even exceeding 90% of automation is required in the future insurance market. So why is this actually a concern of Hannover Re or in reinsurance in general? This is a challenge in the market that primary insurance companies face. Historically, primary insurance companies have always looked at reinsurers for expertise to tell them how to make difficult risk decisions. So, and with digitization, they're not only looking for expertise or consulting or knowledge, they're looking at a package that contains all that knowledge to make clever, smart, and profitable decisions at the point of sale. And this knowledge is bundled into software. So this is how reinsurance companies, that's not exclusive of Hannover Re, there's a couple of competitors in the market, come to serving the market as a software company. Quite surprisingly, actually, and they kind of still hesitating to accept that role in the market. But it's there. And in the meantime, actually, it's turned around. So if you as a reinsurer have solid knowledge of decision-making processes and a superior package to automate that decision-making at the point of sale, it turns into a major competitive advantage. So it's actually a pull factor from the system to the knowledge, not from the knowledge to the reinsurer. So we see this as a trend, especially in highly competitive markets like the UK. So UK is probably one of the most competitive insurance markets in the world. And as a consequence of this, Hannover Re decided to build a next-gen automated underwriting system. And this is, I want to take the opportunity to say a few words about myself. When they looked through the system landscape that they had back in 2012, they found systems that were optimally developed for specific markets. So they had a system in the US, they had a system in South Africa, in Australia, in the UK, in Germany. But none of those systems qualified as an ideal candidate for a truly global solution. So they decided they needed to do something else, something new. And they were looking for people who are experienced in running large software development projects and bring a substantial background of product management, because they're building this system not for themselves, but for their clients. And this is a product line approach. You can't, just build a version of software for each individual primary insurer. So you have to back that up with product management. So I happened to be around when that position was vacant, and I accompanied Hannover Re through 3.5 years of quite ambitious project development time. So just quickly, we were building a system, designing and building and delivering a system that serves all of the predominant sales channels, from online, increasingly online, specifically mobile sales of insurance, through more traditional sales like agents or brokers, tele-underwriting where inbound or outbound calls are being made, to bank insurance, for example, which is still a predominant sales factor in France and other countries. So this system is suitable of dealing with all these channels and automating decision-making at the point of sale immediately. So once the dialogue's done, you can get your policy. You can get it even digitally. So back to that process, the system focuses not so much on raising awareness, and also we excluded service and claims handling and focused on the sales aspect of automation. And we built a runtime that included a web, or specifically for mobile channels, a mobile sales portal that talked to two kinds of back-end components. The risk assessment part would be the engine that contains all the decision-making knowledge that before manual underwriters, people sitting there at the desk looking at the insurance applications, taking smart decisions, would have done. That's the automation part, largely driven by the knowledge of the reinsurer. We bring in third-party services. I come to that in a couple of seconds. Everything is driven by a set of business rules from the modeling of the products, benefits, application forms, business rules, just everything that's required to present the product, have a risk dialogue, and make a decision at the end of the process is contained within this knowledge base. And this is of specific interest for our session here, because we're talking data analytics, the management information. So after application policies are underwritten, decided, and actually in force, Of course, we need transparency over the risk profile of the business that goes on the books. That's the part where MarkLogic comes into play. So the goal, of course, is to learn about risk profiles and improve your underwriting by improving the rules. So, and the feedback goes on and on and on, and you keep getting better and better and better at decision making. So technically, the middle part, which constitutes the runtime, is installed in the IT landscape of the primary insurance company. The Hanover Re hosts the knowledge editing currently. There's plans to open that up for client interaction as well. And we host the management information part. And the way this works, a new knowledge base is brought into the runtime. So, for example, to reflect legislation changes. There's a few things you're not allowed to ask anymore. And you can connect external knowledge bases wherever they are, whatever they contain, to enrich the decision-making process. So, for example, in the US, which is pretty familiar in the US, you you reach out to the motor vehicle records and you bring in data like has been caught drunk driving for one or two times, and a question on the dialogue would say, are you drinking alcohol regularly? And you answer no. That would be a mismatch, and the system would be able to deal with that. So that's the reason why we can connect to basically any kind of information there. And after an application is underwritten, it's handed over into a central data warehouse at Hanover Re, where analytics kicks in. So while the core business process, the decision-making process, sits within the insurance companies, the management information, the data warehouse is centralized, and many clients contribute their data into that data warehouse for analysis. So as you can see, and we're dealing with medical data here, personal disclosures, that's very important that the data is secure. So that's the typical setup. On the client side, we capture underwritten applications, policies if you will, run them through a step that we call MI upload, including a de-identification, anonymization. We remove everything that would allow Hanover Re to identify the individual who signed this policy, pretty much eliminate that or garble it or reduce it, generalize it, because mass data analytics doesn't need your name or email address. We care about different features. We establish a secure connection, ingest it into the central data warehouse, and you can see here SQL data warehouse, because that was, when we started that project, an assumption cast in stone by the IT architects. It's going to be a data warehouse project, it's a database, so we have to use Microsoft SQL Server. That was just a given, and we started discussing with them if that's the optimal choice. And then what we now have is a fictitious dialogue that I think it carried on over 3 to 4 months in various situations, various meetings, where we presented requirements and they responded, we can do this with a relational schema, but maybe you have to make sacrifices. And they started this exercise with a functional view on the data model, apparently. And this is actually a very representative screenshot of what the data landscape looked like. It was relatively complicated, and we wanted to focus on the data hubs first. And the response was, yeah, okay, we thought it's just one bucket, but apparently it's several buckets, but no problem, we're used to that, we can set up relations, we get that done. And then they asked, what types of data do we need to store? Do you know now and maybe in the future? And we said, yeah, pretty much we're dealing with a a lot of structured data. Give a few examples here. But also, we're not quite sure, but we may need to deal with semi-structured data, because the dialogue, when you purchase an insurance, there's a question, you answer that question, then the system thinks about your answer, and it presents a number of new questions in an unforeseeable way. You may not call it artificial intelligence, but it's very close. It's an expert system, very much rule-based. So you never know what structure your dialogue comes in, what questions are actually asked, what answer options were given, what answers were selected. And if you do the math, it's just not a foreseeable fixed way of representing the data. And the interesting thing is, from the analytics side, we need access to each individual bit of data, to improve underwriting pretty much. So you want to be able to say, we have 45% of people hesitating to answer question 7. You want to get that from the MI. And then you want to rephrase your question 7 to not make 45% of the people hesitant at that point, because it clearly impacts sales. It was pretty clear right from the start that we had to deal with a large number of textual data, because a significant part of the applications actually included doctors' reports or lab results that would come in any format. They're very standardized in the US. If you look at Germany, they're quite the opposite. So every doctor, I think, in principle, will produce their own document, and you have to extract the meaning from that. Also, financial statements. If you have a high face amount, you typically require to hand in a financial statement. These come in as text data, hardly ever standardized. We were looking to ingest binary or encoded data. If you remember back, we had a slide where third-party data could be integrated. Typically, this is proprietary data formats, some of them binary, and we would need to store them and bring them into any analytic range for a later analysis. And probably we would need to deal with something we couldn't foresee at the time. For example, clickstream data, and depending on the front end, clickstream data can be binary, could be textual, could be XML, could be JSON, could be anything. We didn't know, but all we knew is it's our responsibility to make as much sense out of the data as we can. So the architect said, well, that's an interesting exercise, actually, but we still think we can do it. We just need a lot more time than we originally thought. And they actually went back to their offices and they produced a relational schema that was, I think it would work, no doubt about that, but it was complicated. And especially when it came to dealing with changes, are those assumptions fixed? There was, I think we couldn't have really done it given the time to market requirements. So they asked, are these assumptions fixed? And we said, yeah, kind of, but we anticipate clients to set up completely new insurance products on their own with properties we don't know yet. So that would lead to a different format. They make changes to the questions and answers just arbitrarily because they want to optimize the flow of answers. They would minimize the number of questions asked in order to minimize the churn along the journey as well. And there's no way we can control that. They may decide to regroup risk factors, so combine diseases into one risk class, for example, and make changes to the underlying risk assessment. That's perfectly legitimate depending on the contract. That would again lead to a different representation at the data side. They introduce new business rules with totally different results because they have a way to deal with that for downstream in their process. They may add point of sales data. Clickstream data was one example. For sales control, not so much the underwriting or the risk profile, but the sales controlling. They may decide to set up A/B testing with a reduced questionnaire and an extensive questionnaire, just randomly chosen at runtime, and you get different results from a data standpoint. Or, clients are clients. They may come up with something completely new. So that was actually the point where relational discussions tended to be heated. But not hostile. It was just there was an ambition in the room to get it done. But the primary statement was you're probably asking too much. So and then we came with a business requirement of the predecessor generations in Australia, in the US, in the UK, in Germany. They were all producing XML flavors, all totally different. And of course, there was the expectation to migrate clients over to the new system and have seamless reporting. So the end was, it's not doable. You need to make sacrifices. And we said, no, we don't want to make sacrifices. We have a value proposition, and we need to live up to the competition and customer expectations. And the way we're thinking now would probably not fit into the budgets. It would probably, ruin our time to market considerations. And essentially, we may be missing the boat entirely by relying on that approach. So we thought there has to be a better way. Enter NewSQL. A lot of cool new promises. Hannover Re as a company was not prepared for NoSQL. Of course, they were monitoring the market, but they'd never done a NoSQL project. And there was these cool promises like schema-less ingestion, no modeling, fast and agile methodology. You can scale out with just standard hardware. But what product to choose? So we decided to do a POC and look at a selection of the market. We looked at several open source offerings. We looked at MarkLogic. We looked at a small number of other commercial options. And what we found, and this actually represents the decision-making process by the time, it was very, very important for us that we could ingest native JSON and XML. And at the time, because XML was the predominant language that we had to deal with, MarkLogic was a very strong contender in that field. I can only reinforce and emphasize security. Again, being a reinsurance company, they're very good at making risk decisions. They're very good at understanding risk. There are medical records in the system. It was absolutely clear that we had to have strong security. And we're looking through the NoSQL market, and we found this boring but very important enterprise security stuff, something you can rely on and don't have to worry about yourself as an application programming entity. That was very important. That helped us a lot. I cannot imagine walking up to my steering committee and suggesting something, say, look, security is in our hands. We have to take care about it. But we can do it. They would not believe. The risk is just too high. And at the end of the day, taking scalability transactions into account, that, and also having out of the box a fantastic search engine that we would have to add on with other solutions, that was just a very good package that at the time was the optimal solution for our requirements. So we set out building that actually, and as you can see from the SQL data warehouse, we removed that. We're now based on MarkLogic in production. And what the system does actually, if I have 2 more minutes maybe, the system is a dashboard and reporting interface, pretty much like a web-based Microsoft Excel, where clients connect to, build their own workspace, bring in the data that they want, and start reporting on that without having to go through any internal IT project, any ETL. It's just there because the Reflex system, the Hannover Re underwriting system, produces the application that's transferred into the central data warehouse, and the central data warehouse understands the data. You can start working with it within a minute. All you have to do is connect to that data warehouse and apply for a certificate. We're using MarkLogic functionality pretty extensively, I have to say. We're especially delighted by this facet technology. I think we squeezed out every bit of functionality from the facets, turning them into mini statistics. So whenever there's a click on some of the interaction charts, the mini statistics would immediately recalculate and giving you a visual feedback of the distribution. So an experienced underwriter would see, for example, in the BMI, which is the body mass index, given a certain selection, within a second, that something's off or something's not right. And it would need to drill down and has the ability to drill down into any dimension of several hundreds of dimensions that are freely exposed to analysts. So wrapping it up, what was the business benefit that we as a project took away? I think management would say mission accomplished. Management is very, very happy with that solution. We were looking at the leading player, actually. We had a well-proven system that's in production around the world. Why is this important? We're looking at a lifetime of about 10 to 12 years for that solution. Business relationships from reinsurance to primary insurance in the life and health space are typically very long-lasting. So we needed a stable partnership and not, reconsider technology choices maybe in a year, essentially ruining every investment made at that point. So MarkLogic's been around for a while, very stable. So that was a very important factor for us to rely on. It's an excellent fit with IT. So before traveling to London, I made another call to the IT admin department and I said, look, over the last 2 months, with a lot of productive clients on the system, we had almost zero admin burden. We had so admin personnel in the IT it loves actually MarkLogic. The IT architects are in the meantime considering for other projects internally as well. So there was a learning process for the organization that went actually very well after initial hesitation or maybe also a little bit surprised by a new technology. I can reinforce the point that we have a single platform for all the data. We don't have to maintain a separate search engine. Everything that goes into MarkLogic is searchable. It's accessible by structure. It is multilingual, and we're actually considering a semantic layer as well on top because we're dealing with medical ontologies like ISCO codes in the occupation or ICD-10 codes in the diseases. So semantics would add a lot of value. We have, again, strong and dependable security. We're looking forward to MarkLogic 9. Rumor has it that, there's something coming. And we didn't quite match our time to market goals. We were late, but just by 3 to 4 months. And, looking back at the relational suggestion, we probably would still code the database layer. So after all, it has turned into a competitive adventure in the Hannover Re Services portfolio. And from the client side, which is the most important summary, I guess. So first pilot clients, we have them from Scandinavia, Germany, France is in the process of being onboarded, US and Russia. They're very enthusiastic about the system. And other clients will join this platform soon. So what's left to be done? We're currently dealing only with the application side. So a policy is sold, travels into the data warehouse. We don't yet see the data over the lifetime of the policy. So what we are looking at is actually to complete the data 360 degree. We want to get the hands on the in-force data. So how does a policy perform over the lifetime? And also, of course, we need to see claims. Claims give a very good indication how to improve your underwriting. So, but having gone through the initial step of bringing application data onto the data warehouse, we're actually looking forward to it, and we're not afraid of any model change. So, quite an interesting project, quite an interesting result, and we're actually very happy to take the next step. I think that's all I had for today, and now it's cocktail time. Questions? Any questions? Yes, please.
So your data warehouse collected data from several countries, and these were very personal data, medical records, financial statements, background information.
Yes.
From a legal and compliance standpoint, how did you handle cross-border rules, and how did MarkLogic help in handling those situations?
It's an excellent question, and data protection considerations have probably consumed 50% of my time over the last 16 months. I could actually, if we had the time, I could bring up a presentation, 80 slides, just about compliance to individual laws and regulations, because Norway has a different set of rules for data protection than the US. We currently have established a framework that is fully compliant to HIPAA in the US, which is the way of dealing with medically sensitive data. We are preparing to comply with the new European Union regulation that's effective May 2018. But of course, it overshadows everything we do right now. So the answer to your question is we take that very, very serious. We have an anonymization process. You remember one of those slides. On the client side, the data goes through this de-identification step. We remove data that is immediately identifying an individual. And we also generalize data. We call them indirect identifiers that combined could also, reveal a lot about the individual. If you take the BMI of 45 in an area where just 100 people live, and the application date, pretty much who applied. So we generalize that to a smaller concept, and we are effectively customizing this process for every country. So we have country-specific de-identification rules crafted for the countries in production, and we're preparing others for legislation. So this, unfortunately, there is no global standard for data protection. It's going to keep us very busy. So MarkLogic helped because the flexibility of the ingest process is just it doesn't really matter. You can just add that business logic onto the database and it would just execute it.
I have a follow-up question. Together. So if you want to deliver a personalized, service to a specific client, how do you put the data back together so you can trace it down?
In the central scenario, we don't. We have an option for clients to OEM that piece of software into their landscape, and then remove the de-identification step, put in the full data, and run it if they're interested. So that's the only way to make it work. You cannot make the personal data leave the country. That's already a breach of data protection in most countries. Probably not the US, but other countries are very, very careful. And there is fines that go up in the European Union up to 4 to 5% of your annual revenue. That's being a $20 billion company. That's just that's a fine. And more questions? Yes, please.
You said you didn't use semantics yet.
Yes.
So how did you join all the data coming from the different countries? One of the previous presenters said semantics.
We actually used some kind of lightweight semantics, but we didn't use triples or RDF. We interpreted data and aligned the meaning across different structures. That's essentially building an ontology, and we represented it as facets in MarkLogic lingo. There would be facets, regardless of where they came from. There was an abstraction layer that we coded ourselves, primarily from an efficiency standpoint, but if we now come back from a user standpoint, users may want to deal with medical ontologies, occupational ontologies. We may remap free text entries into ontology space, to make it accessible through structure, not through full text search. These are steps, beyond step one. And we're well prepared because the semantics package is built in, and it's just available. It's just a matter of priorities. More?
One last question.
Yeah,
from
sure.
that gentleman here.
I'm not sure how relevant this is, but just curious. I guess most people buying insurance online, rather than go directly to the primary insurer, would go through an aggregator like Money Supermarket.
Yeah.
And if you're kind of not on, probably like Google, if you're not on the first page of results, you probably may as well not be there, right? So is your solution kind of helping your clients to get to the top of that list? Or?
No, not really. We're not boosting search results. So, but once you have a sponsored or an organic link in Google that would take you to, say, a very exciting offer for a life policy, then the system could kick in. So the landing page could already be contained in the Hanover system, but it's not controlling the search order.
Presumably that's the responsibility of the primary insurer that comes to you for reinsurance to do that.
Yes, pretty much. Because the reinsurer is not a sales agency, so the primary insurer, they know their market very well, and Hanover they are providing the tools and the processes and the expert knowledge to make sound business decisions at the end of the day, because everyone wants to write profitable business, and increasingly there is a tendency that in insurance companies, they start up, they don't take the risk. They just know how to sell, but they don't know how to carry the risk, and they push over 100% of the risk onto the books of the reinsurer. The reinsurer is essentially reinsuring or insuring the risk completely. This is why these systems, have an increasing relevance for this kind of business relationship, especially in Asia. In emerging markets, hardly any carry around.
The primary insurer is your sales agent, basically.
In some markets, they actually do, yeah. And there's a tendency, the middle market, the primary insurer that also carries a lot of risk, is probably going to go away in favor of reinsurers taking the risk and primary insurers selling, which isn't a bad thing to do, I guess.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you've got more questions, I'm sure Matthias will be around to answer them personally. Thanks again, Matthias. That was fantastic.